G'day and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I want to show you perhaps the best stretch that you absolutely should be doing, but probably aren't. And that's the couch stretch. So the couch stretch is fantastic for a number of reasons. One of which is that it goes to attack some of the muscular soft tissue tightness at the front of your hips and down into your thighs. And this stretch comes highly recommended for anyone suffering from any form of knee pain, hip pain, thigh pain, even low back pain, because of how integral it tends to be mechanically at solving some of the root causes of those dysfunctions. So obviously if the front of your hip is tight or the front of your thigh is tight, it pulls a lot of slack out of your knee. It can obviously change the function of your quads and your thigh muscles. It obviously has a huge influence over your hip because it crosses the front of the hip, but those hip flexors also attach into the front of the lower back. So if you're someone who has any form of low back pain, this is a fantastic stretch to try and do in some form to see what effect it may have on your symptoms, and you might be pleasantly surprised at how big of an effect and how big of an impact it can have on how you feel. So as the name implies, a great place to start with this stretch is on a couch or a chair or a seat of some sort. What we'll do is I'll do this version first, and then for anyone who finds that it's a little bit too easy, we'll remove the chair and I'll do it down on the ground, which amplifies this stretch significantly more. So what we want to basically do is we want you to stand up and ideally lean forwards and really try and get your knee into the back corner of that chair. And the pressure should basically be above your kneecap. It shouldn't be directly on your kneecap. So if you have any knee pain and you're worried about the pressure of being in this position, you're welcome to have a towel or a cushion underneath. But just know that ideally the pressure is above that kneecap, not right directly on top of that. Once you're in this position, we want to make sure that if you have something to hold on to, that you keep your back straight and we extend up through your hips. What a lot of people do is that by trying to get up as vertical as possible, a lot of people sort of stop when the hip gets tight and they tend to arch backwards and bend through their back. It's really common for people to feel some cramping in their hamstrings or through their glutes or calves if your back's in a bad position. So make sure that you keep that back relatively straight and just come up as far as you feel comfortable until you feel some tightness and some restriction at the front of that hip or down towards that thigh a little bit more. Once you're in this position, I want you to tense up anything that feels tight. So that may mean just squeezing your thigh muscle, just tensing that muscle up. It may also mean pushing your foot back into the surface behind you to flare that tissue up to get that tissue to work. As we go through a lot on the channel, this is the PNF or that contract relax type stretching. It's fantastic because it gets your brain involved. It asks your tissue to tense up so that when you stop tensing, there's a reflex or a reflexive response that happens that then asks that tissue to physically release and relax. So you should then be able to go a fraction further straight away. So obviously, once you've found a good tight spot here, what you can also do is you can gently twist your trunk and your hips towards the left side a little bit, just to bias a different part of the front of that hip. You can also twist a little bit towards the other direction, again, to find a different part of that hip as well. You can also tilt your hips or shift your hips across to the same side, which should in theory make it a little bit harder for you. You might also shift your hips away to take some of the tension off that if you feel that's necessary. But ideally what we want is we want you to feel like you're relatively up nice and tall. Everything's in line without feeling like you're too twisted or off center, but also finding the perfect stretch for you. Once you've found that, again, give it a squeeze for about 5 seconds, tense that up, then when you relax, it should give a little bit and you should be able to go a fraction further into the stretch straight away. And then again, if you can spend a few minutes just working through that at a level that feels comfortable for you, the first time that you attempt this stretch, it may feel quite brutal. It could feel quite challenging if it's the first time you've done it. Just know that you want to find a very safe and comfortable entry point for you. If that's completely vertical, that's fantastic. If you find that you're a little bit more horizontal before you find all that tightness, that's completely fine as well. Remember, your brain and nervous system has to feel safe and comfortable if it's going to genuinely relax and shift in a positive direction. If you go right into that stretch in a way that you hold your breath and you can't really talk, you can't laugh, you can't breathe, and you've gone too far into that stretch, and it's really hard for your brain to feel safe enough to then relax and let go and to make optimal change in the shortest amount of time. And for anyone who finds that this particular version of the stretch is too easy for you, if you feel like it's not quite as challenging as you'd like it to be, then we can basically remove the chair and we can do this on the ground in some way. So again, the idea is you want to have your knee right back into the corner and have your upper leg up into this sort of high lunge position. And then again, making sure that the extension and the movement coming up is coming from the front of your hip, not your back. You keep everything relatively still. You should then be able to come up with your hip closer to your heel in a position that doesn't feel terrible. Now, because this requires more hip mobility to get into this position than it does on the chair, this is a significantly harder stretch for a lot of people. So please work your way up to this. Make sure you spend a lot of time on the chair first. But again, once you're in this position, you can sort of rotate from side to side. You can shift your hips from side to side. You can sort of try and lean back a little bit further through your hip to find the best version of that stretch. Again, once you've found it, make sure you squeeze that tightness, tense up your hip, squeeze your bottom, make that hip musculature work. Hold that for a few seconds. Again, when you relax, it should relax. You should then be able to go a little bit further into the stretch. And as I was saying, if you have any particular long-term knee issues, if you're someone who has some hip dysfunction, if you have a grumbly back, or you're an athlete who just wants to run faster, jump higher, function better, or just someone who doesn't want to feel stiff and tight anymore, this couch stretch is genuinely one of the best exercises that you can do. It's fast acting, it's very safe, but it's really impactful. It's very central to a lot of the dysfunction that we tend to have day to day. And so the other thing that's really important to understand here is that the main reason why we tend to get stiff here in the first place is because we tend to sit quite a lot. When we're in this sort of 90-degree shape quite a lot, we're never really getting our knee behind us and extending through that hip and sort of elongating these tissues and using these tissues to their full capacity. So if you're someone who spends a large amount of time sitting, you might find that this feels quite terrible for you to begin with. But if you're trying to make genuine change with the flexibility through this area, it may also be worthwhile just taking note of how often you sit, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether you drive a lot, whatever it might be, and also trying to sort of mitigate or change or optimize the amount of time you spend sitting so that this doesn't want to keep tightening up over time. Please let me know in the comments down below how you found this felt and how much of a change you felt it made relatively quickly. If you like this type of content, please consider leaving a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you do find this really helpful and this did help solve a problem for you, please let me know by leaving a super thanks donation on the video. Again, it's a great way to help support me and the channel going forwards. But with that being said, good luck. I hope you can find some enjoyment and some positivity from this stretch. It can be quite brutal, so be gentle, but you will see you in the next one.